Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
Hi guys, welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear to Send podcast. This is Francois, your co-host, and I'm here with Roel. Hey Roel, how are you?
Hello, how are you doing?
Very good, thank you. We're recording today about how to approach a validation survey, Wi-Fi validation survey. So we actually received a list of questions from one of our listeners, more like practical questions on everything you need to think about when you prepare and you want to actually go on site to do a validation survey. So we wanted to take some time and then talk about all these practical aspects and share some of the tips that we do when we actually do those type of surveys.
Yeah, I think this is a great topic because it's not one that's when it's taught in some classes, it's really talking about specific things, but here we're going to talk about some of the things that we do when we're on site. Francois and I both do it differently. There are things that are similar, but we also wanted to provide more tips beyond just the technical aspect of doing a validation survey.
Yeah, exactly. We kind of wanted to share our real-world experience of what happens when you on site, what type of equipment you need to bring. So in this episode, we're going to try to answer the following question. First, which step do you need to take in order to make sure that everything runs smoothly? So make sure that you're ready. What type of information, do you need to gather from the customer so you actually have everything you need when you arrive on site and you're pretty much ready to go? Also, what type of information do you need to give to your customer so that, on their end, they are ready to welcome you and they have everything ready in place for you to start working right away. And then we'll talk about different pieces of equipment that you would need to bring with you. And then we wanted to share our experience of what we do on site and how we gather the data and how we go about doing the actual survey.
Yeah. So there's going to be one packed episode, but we'll try to condense it as much as we can.
Yes. And then also we'll put everything in the show notes. So if you go to cleartosend.net/213, so 213, you should be able to go back and retrieve that information if you want to reference it, at later dates or, when you're actually preparing for one of those validation surveys.
All right. So one of the first things you're going to do is prepare to go on site. So there are a couple of things that you want to do prior to even stepping foot, because you want to be well prepared for what's going to happen on site. So Francois, what are some of the important things you need to gather from your client or customer or from, somebody else in another department?
Yeah. So first you need to understand what type of survey you're about to do, right? So here we named it validation survey, but actually what we're referencing to here is it's, survey you do of an existing Wi-Fi network, right? So it could be, you could have different, scenarios. It could be because, you actually designed the Wi-Fi and the customer just deployed it and you want to go and validate that everything has been installed properly. So that's what we usually call a validation survey, post-deployment site survey, exit survey. You could have different terms here. So that could be an example of, the type of survey we're talking about here. Or it could be, it could be a customer calling you because they want to assess their Wi-Fi. Something is wrong, or, they're thinking about adding a new application, a new device, and they want you to assess the current Wi-Fi network. So that would be also, a type of site survey we're talking about here. Or it could be like a troubleshooting site survey, maybe.
Yeah, it could be any number of those. And I've gone into very many of those situations where I show up and it's more of, we just need a heat map of what our coverage looks like. We think we have some coverage holes, or they go, all right, we want to redesign this whole thing, but we want to know what it looks like first. And so they can compare a before and after.
Exactly. So a thing you need, first, you need to gather very important pieces of information from the customer, right? The first thing you need, obviously, is the floor plan. And what you want to try to focus on is to get quality, updated floor plans, right? You don't want the original floor plans from the 30s. You want something that's updated, and you also want something that's high quality. If you can get the CAD files, that's better. If you get a PDF, that's good as well.
Yeah, and hopefully they do have those. Usually whoever was the architect of the building will have those floor plans, but there are going to be times where you probably don't have access to any floor plans, or the contact that you have says, I don't have any. And so what do you do if there are no floor plans, right? And so I have been in just a few situations like that where they don't provide me with any. So they say, well, you're going to have to create it. And I'm no CAD expert. I don't know how to create floor plans, but sometimes there are exit floor plans, like emergency exit floor plans in the building, and I could try to use one of those, for example. It might not be 100% correct, but a lot of times they are very close, because it is more of a safety thing where you have to know where you are in the building and then go to the right exit. So sometimes I use that.
Yeah, and if you have to take a picture of an exit floor plan, make sure that you take you spend some time to take a proper picture. Make sure it's not distorted, so you can actually keep the scale, and have it some sort of accurate floor plan. And then you can, on top of the picture you take, you can draw some of the walls. If you want to add the walls, the hallways, and all of that. The worst case I've had is a customer that didn't have any floor plans. They didn't have any, actual physical floor plans on site. They didn't have any exit floor plans either, because it was like a very, minimalist interior design.
Yeah.
And so I was left with satellite view of the building.
Oh, wow.
So it was a nightmare. Yeah.
And then you had to build in the wall so you knew like where you were on your validation survey.
It wasn't a big building. It was like a car dealership, right? So
okay.
It wasn't that big. But in those situations, you have to, communicate with the customer. You have to say that, I'm not going to be able to provide as much value to you if you provide, those type of floor plans. If you want me to, deliver on, on the value, you have to give me quality floor plans.
Yeah, that's where you have to set the expectations prior to going on site. And when you do that, you sometimes you got to be blunt with these guys, and they have to understand that, the data is only as good as the data you're putting in. So if you're having to do a survey on a floor plan that doesn't exist, that's the accuracy of that survey could be way off, right?
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, updated quality floor plans is always the best. Then you need to understand which area you need to survey. Right. If you ask the customer, which area do you want me to survey, they're going to tell you everything.
Yeah.
So you have to, you have to ask some more specified questions, because most of the time they don't want everything, but they don't know it. Right. So you have to kind of drive the discussion and ask them, okay, what I do is I ask which areas are critical for you. Right. Or you can say, which devices are critical for you? Where do you use those devices? And then you say, what about the hallways? What about the staircases? What about the outdoor areas? What about the mechanical rooms? And then, according to what the customer is telling you, you can define which area are critical and which area are not as critical for the business, right? So then when you go on site to do the survey, if they want you to do everything, let's say indoor, you can do everything indoor. And then if you find out that, you don't have access to a specific area that's not very, very critical, like let's say, out like on the roof, mechanical room or whatever, then you can just, notify it document it, and then it's not as bad as if you couldn't get in a critical boardroom. Right?
Yeah, and that's where a lot of walkthroughs in the beginning before you start your survey will be important, because you might find something on a floor plan that you didn't see in the walkthrough, for example. So you might bring that up as a question, and you might want to also look at how people are walking in the environment with their devices, and that's how you can see what areas actually do need to be covered for a survey. And generally, it's going to be 100%, right? They're going to say it's 100% coverage everywhere, but then you're going to have to ask, well, does a stairwell count as coverage area, or do the restrooms count? Like, do you need service in the restrooms? Which for most people is probably going to be yes, but it still doesn't hurt to ask, right? Because if you do your survey and let's say you skip the stairwell or the restroom, then the customer or the client might say, hey, how come there's no signal in this area? So you just want to be sure.
Yeah, exactly. So when the customer tell me 100%, the first question I always ask is, okay, so outdoor, where does your property stop? And then they kind of realize, they're like, okay, maybe it's not 100%, and then you can go from there, and then you can drive the discussion. Okay, so once you know that, once you have the floor plans, you know which area to cover. Then I like to have the actual access points location if they have it. So if you do a post insertion survey and you were the one designing the Wi-Fi, you're supposed to know where the APs are. If you're just assessing, you can try to see with the customer if they have the original design documents, or if they have, a picture of the AP locations. I like to have this information because later on, when I document my APs, I like to make sure that I didn't forget any, and it also allows me to find the APs that are not easy to find, right? And then most of the time, the APs that are not easy to find are not installed properly. So you can actually document all of that.
Yeah, and knowing where those access points are would be helpful for when you're analyzing the survey afterwards, and then you notice that, well, you say there's an access point here, but there was actually nothing broadcasting there. And so that'd be useful for them because they may have hidden the AP, and so there's no visual inspection, and possibly that AP is just not online, things like that.
Or what happened to me the other day is you can see the AP broadcasting, but you cannot see the AP physically, right? And so you're like, where is the AP?
Yeah, where is it?
So you can document all of that. And in our case, I think the AP was just sitting on top of the ceiling or something.
Yeah.
And the installer probably, had to do something else and then didn't go back to where they stopped. Or maybe they were missing some sort of equipment to actually mount the AP properly. Yeah. So that those things happens if you do, deployment for like 100 APs to 100 APs, you're going to have those sort of things. That's totally normal. And having the map of APs help you to actually pinpoint those problems.
Exactly.
All right. So other piece of information that I like to ask my customers is the controller configurations. And what I look for in those configurations would be the access points radio configuration. So I look at the transmit power and channels used by the 2.4 radios. I look at the transmit power channel used and channel width for the 5 gig radios. And then I look at the SSID profile. I look at which one I'm expecting to see broadcasted by the APs. I look at the radio profiles to make sure that, things are not crazy, using crazy high powers, or, do like a first check. And then I look at the AP groups to see, how the APs are configured and to see, which SSID I'm expecting to see in which area of the building.
Yeah, that's a lot of good information, especially if you need to troubleshoot it afterwards with the survey.
Yeah, allows me to troubleshoot it afterwards and to see if, the SSIDs are properly, broadcasted, or, the APs are properly configured, the channel width and all of that. So that's what I like to have before going on site. So I can actually go through that information and prepare myself. then a couple of questions. We have a couple of questions you could ask the customer to actually help you prepare for the on-site survey. So one thing I like to do is if I have no idea what, the original Wi-Fi was designed for, I like to get a sense of why, what was the original design? Why did they install Wi-Fi? What's the critical equipment they use on Wi-Fi? What's the critical applications? If it's like very specific applications, I like to know the path of the devices
that's
within the environment. Yeah.
Yeah, because then when you do your validation survey, you could actually walk the same path and see what roaming would look like.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I'd be surprised if you get an answer for what the Wi-Fi network was designed for.
Yeah, because
I
never know.
I've never had a good answer for that. Or when I ask, all right, what was the thought process for designing this initial network? And then they just kind of give me this blank look like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. So one purpose of this question is also to educate the customer on the importance of actually doing Wi-Fi design. Yeah. So by asking those questions, like, they sometimes they're going to be like, why are you asking me those questions?
Yeah. This is the first time anyone's ever asked me this.
Yeah. And then it can actually educate them in the fact that, this is actually something you engineer, right? A Wi-Fi network is something you actually engineer. You have a specific thought process behind it. And it's actually important to design if you want it to work according to your expectations.
Yeah, because I would say like finding critical equipment and applications is the easier one to do. But there are times where your contact maybe doesn't know. And that's when you could say, hey, do you mind if I speak to one of the people out here and ask them what applications they're using?
Yeah. 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 And then what I like to do is I like to talk about the actual the current situation, right? Especially if it's an assessment. Usually they call you to do a site survey, and I like to understand why. Do you call me to do a site survey because you're having problems, or do you call me to do a site survey because you're thinking of introducing a new application and you want to make sure that the Wi-Fi is going to support it, or what's the status? So what's the status of your Wi-Fi network right now? Or do you call me to do site survey because you're thinking of changing the APs? So I like to know what the status and why behind the customer calling me to do the job.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Then a couple of practical thing I like to ask the customer to have the AP broadcasting their name. So when you actually do the site survey, you can see the AP name in Ekahau.
That's actually a really good tip.
Yeah, this makes it so much easier for reporting, both for you and for the customer, right? They'll be able to see their own AP name in the report. This works if you have the AP name lower than
than a few characters.
I want to do. Yeah,
I know on my campus we use really long names to help us locate. Just if anyone wanted to find an AP, it'd be easy. But when you do a survey, it cuts it off in Ekahau.
Yeah, so you have to be mindful of that. But anyway, Cisco, you can do that by enabling the AeroNet information element under the SSID profile advanced tab in Aruba. They have an option under the SSID profile called Advertise AP Name. Each vendor has its own stuff, and you can enable it for the time of the survey. When you're done, you can disable it, makes the beacon frame a little shorter, reduce the airtime utilization, the SSID overhead.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something I like to ask. If the people are using RM or ARM or any sort of radio resource management algorithm, I like to have them fixed fix the algorithm so it doesn't change on me all the time when I do the survey.
Yeah, that'll be problematic for you afterwards when you see the same AP on different channels, for example, or what'll be harder to see is when the transmit power has changed. So it may look like for 5 minutes you've got really good signal, and then the next 5 minutes it's a different transmit power. because especially on Cisco side, where if someone just uses the defaults for transmit power control.
Yeah, and some systems are notorious to change the channel very often.
Yeah.
So when you do a survey, like and AP changes channel, what will happen is when you're done, you'll see the AP and you'll see like multiple radios underneath that AP with different channels. When in reality, you only have one radio. Just change the channel on you.
Yeah, so it becomes more administrative overhead for you when you're looking at the survey and you're creating reports, and then things aren't realistic, right? So that could be one of the things that comes up afterwards is your APs are constantly changing channels. Like you shouldn't be seeing that. I mean, unless the environment calls for it, but I would imagine that's pretty hard on some clients.
Well, if you have the time one day, just look at the logs of your controllers or system, and then look at the channel or the AP channel change. Sometimes you can be surprised. Anyway, other type of practical questions we like to ask. First one is related to access, right? So will I have access to all the areas? If not, will I have someone escorting me? And then make sure that the customer is ready or has the access ready for you the day you arrive, right?
Yeah.
The last survey I did, I had to start at 6 a.m. in the morning because I was doing a survey for, like a higher ed institution, and they wanted me to do it before the students come into classroom. And I had, when you show up on site at 6 a.m., your first point of contact will be the security team, right? And so you need to make sure that the customer understand that. You need to make sure that the security is aware of you coming in, and make sure that they have, the access ready for you to use.
Yeah, right? That's going to be important, especially in different types of areas. Like if you were to do a survey in a lab environment, there may be very special procedures when you're walking into a lab. So you may have to wear certain kind of garments or protective gear. And then you may be required to walk in a certain lab, and you may not be able to walk back into that lab, especially if you go into another lab. So there's very specific requirements that you may have to know about before going on site. So I would definitely ask those questions when someone says we have a special area that, either a lab area or some sort of scientific area. You should ask them, all right, what kind of procedures are there for walking into these labs? And can I walk into there by myself, or does somebody have to escort me? Because there's going to be certain requirements.
Exactly. And then especially if you're thinking about manufacturing environments, I had cases where I was doing, like, let's say a food manufacturing environment, and you had to dress up, sanitize everything, your laptop and everything before going in. Yeah. Right. And you don't want to do that twice. Right. So you want to make sure you have everything ready to do that. You want to make sure that you know it beforehand, so you can plan for a little bit more time as well. And then, some other environment, they're going to ask you to wear, like mask or whatever. The last survey I did, I had to go in specific chemistry lab, like you said, in a higher end environment, and then I couldn't go alone. I had to go with one of the staff or teacher, because I simply didn't have access to those areas. They have specific set of keys because I have, I'm guessing, dangerous chemical equipment in there. So I had to be escorted for some of the area, and you want to know about these in advance, so you can actually plan for them. Maybe you can plan for a specific date in advance with the staff. Also, when you do hospitals, sometimes you want to see that, if they have some scheduling problematics, maybe you can go in a specific department at one specific day on one specific hour, because they have a lot of people coming in. So you want to try to plan for these as much as you can. Try to ask the questions to your customers, so you can actually make them aware of that of it, and then plan for it accordingly.
Yeah, it would be a good idea too for you to have your own personal protective equipment. So a hard hat, some goggles, maybe some what do you call it? To cover your shoes, like booties. Just to put that in your car or carry it with you, because you never know if you'll need it.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that when we talk about the equipment you'll need. But yeah, that's actually a really, really good idea, smart idea. And it also makes you look professional if you have it with you.
Yep.
Other practical questions you could ask is, like I said, do they have any restriction on scheduling? And this could depend on the environment. So it's very hard to, talk about every environment, but examples I've been through warehouses, for instance, and they wanted me to work off hours. And the off hours was between, 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So you could think it's really bad, but for me, it was awesome. You have an empty warehouse to you. You don't have, forklift going left, right.
Yeah.
You can actually make your work easier. And if they allow you to do that, it's, sometimes even better. So you have to understand those scheduling restrictions, because you kind of have to plan your work around it. And always remember that when you do a validation survey, you're intruding someone's working space.
Yeah.
Right. So they always have the priority over your work. So you kind of have to work around whichever restrictions they're giving you.
Yeah. And I would say too, on the business side of things, if they require off hours, sometimes some companies will charge a little bit more for off hours, especially if it's going to be late. I know I've worked with some people where if I've needed them, they like either like a contractor or something, they'll say, yeah, it's a little bit more for me to come on site if it's after, I don't know, 8 p.m., for example.
Okay. Then I had another question you could ask them, would I need any personal protective equipment? Like you said, well,
yeah.
Sometimes they'll tell you in advance. Would I have to go through a specific security training? So that happened to me once, I think, where I went to this manufacturing plant, and they put me through a training as soon as I arrived. So it was like a 1 hour,
before
online,
you started.
Yeah, before I started, it's like a 1 hour online training on how security worked in their warehouse, what to do in case of fire, what to do in case of problems, and so you go through this, and then after that you're ready to start your work.
Yeah, I've had a warehouse do a safety training that was mandatory for some sites. So there was a survey I was doing for multiple sites. One required safety training, the other one didn't.
Yeah, so I mean, it's nice to know about them because you can just plan.
Yeah, you want to accommodate your time for that.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have other type of practical questions. How does parking work? Do you guys have contractor parking spots? That happened to me sometimes. So you can actually have reserved contractor parking spots you can use. So you don't have to go through regular parking, or you have to pay for parking and stuff like that. Then, you can ask, will I be able to take pictures? Right?
Yeah.
Usually to document your work. Usually it's not a problem. If you sign an NDA with the customer, they allow you to take pictures. And then you just have to be mindful and use common sense when you take the picture. Make sure that you don't take pictures of staff, or
or whatever's on their whiteboard, or anything proprietary. Yeah. Well, there's things that they may be working on that's out in the open that might not, they don't want those photos taken because it's very proprietary to their business and competitive nature. So if you're going to take pictures, just try to take the pictures of just the Wi-Fi equipment.
Yeah. Just use common sense. All right. So that those are, some of the questions you could ask them to get ready. We have them in the show notes, right? If you're a little lost in our talking here. Then what we like to do is we actually like to communicate some information to the customer so they understand how we work and how they can get ready on their end. Okay. So it's usually, a good idea for the customer to communicate with their security team. So they expecting you, they know about you, and it makes everything easier. right? You just show up on site, you show your ID. They're like, oh yeah, we were expecting you. Here's your access. What do you need? We're here for you. And then everything goes smoothly. If they don't know about you, it's a totally different tone, right? Especially if you're showing up at 6 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah. And it takes longer to do anything because they'll be looking at you. They'll treat you differently.
Yeah. Like, oh, okay, I need to contact my boss to approve you. And then, obviously the boss is sleeping and all of that. So,
and one thing to know when there's security at a location, sometimes they'll have to check your bag. And so there's locations where they want to make sure you're not bringing in something that you shouldn't be bringing in. And also they want to be sure you're not taking something out of their environment. So some security people will ask to see what's in your bag and what is it. And as long as they've been told ahead of time who you are and what you're doing, you should be good. And I've had to show the contents of my bag, and they just want to know I'm not taking their products.
And something else that's a good idea for the customer is that they send internal communication. So people are actually expecting you as well. So not everyone reads the internal communication. So you could expect people, not knowing what you're doing.
To give you weird looks, yeah.
Yeah, they give you weird looks, but at least it set the grounds. And then people will be like, oh yeah, I saw the email. Now I know who you are, or something like that, right?
Especially if you're taking pictures.
Especially if you're taking pictures, right? And if they can include your name into that communication, it's even better. So you make it a little bit more personal. And then when you introduce yourself, they're like, oh yeah, I know. I've seen your name. I know you were going to come this week or something like that.
Yeah. Especially when they tell people that you're here for Wi-Fi, a lot of people actually welcome you because the Wi-Fi may not be good. So they really want you to be there to fix it. And if you're wearing something on your clothes that has a little Wi-Fi signal on there, like maybe one of those vests with the Wi-Fi signal from WLAN Pros, then they'll know that you're there for a specific reason. I've been in an environment where it was warehouse people and they didn't really communicate who I was. And so I always got weird looks because people thought I was watching them and taking note of what they were doing. But so those are like the interesting things. So they just kind of give you a weird look and then they work faster. And I'm like, okay.
Do you joke with them? You're like, did you pick up order number J34?
I just nod my head. I go, okay, got it.
Oh man. Yeah, you're right. So a way to identify yourself or what you're doing is very nice. I used to have this laptop with all my Wi-Fi stickers, and it worked. It worked really well. So people knew where I was, what I was doing. I don't use this laptop anymore because I use a tablet now.
Yeah.
But I actually got an idea from Ferney. He wears, one of the conference badge with his name and picture. And then you can put a Wi-Fi sticker on it. Yeah. And you can use that for your survey. And then when people ask you what you do, who you are, you can just say, here, I'm Francois and I'm here to do some Wi-Fi work. I've been, contracted by the company or the IT team or something like that. And
I like that subtle advertising that Ferney is doing. Yeah, my name's Ferney from WLAN Pros. We have a company.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, you can custom, make a custom one with your name and your company name or whatever you want. But a way to identify yourself is really nice. Yeah, that's something I need to do better because I don't always do it all the time.
Yeah. It's something that's never really thought about when you go on site. You just kind of expect your contact to help send that information out, right? But sometimes you don't know if they've actually done it.
And sometimes people don't read them.
Yeah.
I think that's more So I had a pro tip there. I said, if you're not too sure about which type of information you need to gather from the customer, right? If you're not too sure about which question to ask, depending on the environment, try to think about the workflow you will have, the workflow you'll go through when you arrive on site, right? So think about every step you have to do. And then once you think about it, you're necessarily going to think about the type of information you'll need. right?
Yeah.
So if you're arriving by car, you're like, okay, where do I park my car? And then if you arrive, at which time, like, who do I talk to the first, who's my first point of contact on site?
Yeah.
Do I have that information? Do I have the phone number? Then where do I go next? Where do I put my equipment? Do they have a room for me? Do they have an office, closed office where I can leave my equipment in there? And so if you go through your workflow, all this information will come to mind, and you can actually make sure you have everything you need.
Yeah, exactly. It all comes down to the preparation before stepping on site.
Yeah, the goal for me anyway, the goal is as soon as I arrive on site, I can start right away.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't want to waste time trying to get everything ready, right? You don't want to go, all right, do I have access? All of a sudden just start asking, do I have access to every single room? And then when they didn't know about it, and one of the examples could be you walk into a large office, there's a lot of conference rooms, and then they go, oh, I didn't know you needed access to all those rooms. Well, every room is being occupied for a meeting that it won't be available for another hour.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, worse, shoot, my Sidekick is not charged.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk about that and the equipment, because you do want to prepare your equipment.
Exactly. So what type of equipment do you need, right, to do a validation site survey? So obviously you need your laptop. Roel and I both use Ekahau. So we use the laptop to use the application. If you use another site survey software, you'll need your laptop regardless. So bring your laptop.
Yeah, I always bring it. Even though I strictly use like an iPad for survey now, I always bring my laptop, because there are some things in Ekahau that you can only do on a laptop versus doing it on your tablet.
Yeah, exactly. Talking about the tablet, you could also bring your tablet if you like to survey from the iPad application, tablet and the pencil. That's actually what I use, the pencil and the tablet. You need your Sidekick as well if you're using a Sidekick. If you're not using a Sidekick, you'll need the adapters and USB hub to connect to the application.
Yeah. I always check those the night before to make sure I have them in my backpack, the cables especially, because the last thing you want to do is show up on site and then you don't even have the USB cables to connect it.
Yeah. We'll talk about that, because I like to have actually a backup of cables.
Oh, nice.
Because sometimes, I had a case where one cable wasn't working for me.
Yeah, and I would say with the tablet too is prior to going on site is try to download those the Ekahau file to your tablet, so you're not doing it there on site, where all of a sudden now you're asking for access to the wireless network. They gotta either whitelist your MAC address, or worse, they have some sort of restriction on their wireless network. That's happened to me where I had to download something. I updated a file, and then I had to download it back to my tablet, and I couldn't download it because there was some sort of restriction that was blocking it.
Yeah, that's a good point we didn't talk about, but ask for access to the Wi-Fi network as well. What I do is I ask for access to the Wi-Fi network they want to validate.
Yeah.
Right. So, and if you do that ahead of time, they have time to create an account for you, maybe, generate a certificate, something like that. And when you arrive on site, you can actually connect to the corporate Wi-Fi, the most important Wi-Fi network.
Yeah, exactly.
So going back to the equipment, what I like to bring as well on site is the external battery pack, the USB one that you can use to actually charge your laptop or charge your iPad. I'll tell you about what I do, but like in some cases, if you survey for a long extended time, I try to reduce the brightness on my iPad as much as I can to extend the battery life. But in some environment, I have to leave it at the top, and then that drains the battery faster. And then I need this battery pack to maintain the battery on my iPad, so I can keep surveying the environment.
So a question then for you, Francois, how do you use a battery pack and your Sidekick to your iPad at the same time?
Good question, Roel. So you actually use an adapter that has both a Lightning and a USB. So I can use my Sidekick as well as connecting the Lightning charger. And I actually included the link in the show notes to one of those. If you have one of the older iPads with a lightning port, you can do that. If you have one of the new iPads with a USB-C connector, you can actually use, one dongle, dongle you would use for your MacBook Pro, let's say, that has, a power input and a USB input.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty much sure you should be able to do the same.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
Yeah, so I like to do that. And an external battery pack, usually it's not too big. You can put it in your pocket. Some people like to survey with a backpack, so they can put their equipment in there. So you could put it in a backpack. I don't like to survey with backpacks, so I just put it in my pocket if I need it. And I go about it like that. But, it's just personal preference. Then you need a laser to measure the scale on site.
Yeah, that's important. And try to get a laser distance finder that can go as far as you can. Because I went to a warehouse recently and I couldn't measure the other side because it was such a big warehouse that my laser distance finder didn't go the full length.
Yeah, so the longer the better, huh? But it depends. Like this going to impact the price as well, because usually the longer distance are more expensive. Yeah. Then you might need some personal protective equipment, PPE. So that's going to depend on the environment. But like Roel said, if you're just driving to the site and you don't need to, fly or anything like that, it's always a good idea to just put it in your car and you have it there available just in case.
Yeah, and always ask if they have it on site. Some environments do have like a community PPE, but I don't know about you guys. I'm like a big germaphobe. I don't like sharing sharing other people's PPE.
Yeah, I've seen some companies having like contractor sets that's actually laundry and all of that, but that's usually for like a very specific, like bodysuit or stuff like that.
Yeah.
I usually like to bring my own because it also looks professional on you.
Yeah, exactly. Like you come prepared. You've set a certain expectation with the client, and they know that you know what you're doing.
Exactly. So what I do is I usually take the steel toe boots, hard hat, yellow vest. Mine is actually orange, so orange vest, I guess. If you have some hearing protection, safety glasses. Sometimes you need harness. That's not very often. That's if you have to do crazy stuff.
Now I'm curious what kind of this crazy stuff you're doing, Francois.
yeah. So we'll just take it out. Then you need to take something that will ID you.
Yeah.
Right. So we talked about the badge earlier or something like that. You can use to identify yourself. Also, always a good idea to bring business cards with you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, because the security guys might ask you, and then if people ask you, I've had people asking me, what company are you with? Do you have a business card or do you have an ID?
Yeah, you'll have some of the really curious people. Say something if you see something like. They'll really want to know who you are, especially in certain environments where they don't really allow outsiders. So it's good to just put that in your business cards in your pocket, just because, you're doing your survey, just hand it out and give it to them and just keep walking.
Yeah, exactly. Or if they ask, you have it on you. And then something that's very important is chargers, adapters, and cables.
Yes,
that's
very important.
Usually it's the stuff you forget, right? And you never have enough, right? So bring backups if you have. So what I like to use is USB to Lightning adapter, so that I can connect the Sidekick to the iPad. And like I said earlier, I have the one there. I can actually also charge as well as connecting the Sidekick. If you use one of the newer iPad Pro, you can use a USB to USB-C adapter, or you could use a cable that has micro USB on one end and USB-C on the other end. So you can actually connect.
You just got to find those. And Francois has a link that he has. So one of the things that I like to mention about cables and adapters is because I use Apple, I tend to stick with the Apple branded cables because I've had a couple just fail on me for whatever reason, or they stop working. And so I had to spend a little extra just to stick with the Apple brand.
Yeah, so I've heard that from other people as well. The one I've purchased never failed on me yet.
Knock on wood.
Knock on wood. And I purchased it from Amazon for half the price, obviously. But
nice.
Anyway, it still works. So
yeah. So if you're gonna get an off-brand,
just be aware of that. Yeah, get to. Yeah. So just be aware of that. That's a really good point. Yeah, what I actually do is I bring 2 iPads because I have to. But I mean, it would be
2 iPads first of all.
Yeah, I do. But it's just because I like to have backups.
No, that's good. Yeah, I mean, the way I do it is I just don't like carrying a lot of equipment, so I bring out my laptop and my iPad. So then if my iPad doesn't work, I'm just gonna end up using my laptop.
So I bring 2 laptops and 2 iPads.
Oh man, you're like extra prepared.
Yeah, because sometimes you don't want to go back to those places twice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean.
So I mean, you don't have to be that crazy, but backups is always a good idea. You never know, and sometimes equipment can fall, right, and you can break them. Something that I'm surprised still works is my pen for my iPad, because man, the pen
I've dropped that thing. Yeah,
it dropped so many times during surveys, and it still works. So
do you also bring 2 Sidekicks?
Yes.
Wow. Well, you're a trainer, so.
Yeah. So, but I understand not everyone can do that.
No, yeah, even I can't do that. That's I would just say the cost alone is.
Yeah, if you go with I usually always use one, because the Sidekick is actually very good on battery life. And then what I do is, another tip I was gonna give is just charge your equipment as soon as you can. So whenever you're not using them, I charge them.
Yeah, me too.
All right, even if I sit 5 minutes to do something, I just charge them.
Yeah, just go charge crazy.
Charge crazy. And usually I don't have to do a full charge before the end of the day, and I can just do it overnight if I do that. So I don't need, but it's just in case something is failing on me.
Yeah, no, that's a good tip, to always charge as much as you can. Anything that requires a charge, you're going to want to do it, because you never know when the power is drained or something else. Like you'll want to make sure that equipment's ready to go when you need it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something really that we can all do, regardless the equipment we have. Something else you could bring with you is a WLAN PI if you need to do some sort of throughput test. All right. And you need an iPerf server. You can just ask the customer if you can connect it to the network and get an iPerf up and running very fast. If you do an outdoor survey and you need a GPS, you would need a GPS receiver. If you want to use that feature on Ekahau, you would need Windows. So you need a Windows laptop. And then, backups, like we said, is a good idea. So, maybe a second battery pack. I have 2 battery pack I bring with me, maybe a second iPad if you have one, maybe a second laptop as well if you have one, maybe a Mac and a Windows,
Yeah.
That's usually what I do. And then something very important, just in general, not just for survey, but you want water.
Yeah. And maybe some snacks too. Like I bring I bring like a what do you call those? Like those little bars to eat on. Like let's say you're at a location where you can't go out for lunch, for example. Like you need to energize yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good idea as well. And sometimes you can be serving over lunch, and then when you go to lunch, the cafeteria is closed. Yeah, it's like, shoot, man, I forgot about that. So those things could happen.
You want to keep yourself energized for the survey so you don't pass out on the middle of the floor.
Exactly. So then, what do we do once we're on site?
Yeah, what do we do?
All right. So a couple of other practical tips we have. Like we said, always bring a business card with you. Security might ask you. And then keep something to identify yourself, right? Something that makes it clear that you're there to do Wi-Fi related work. So you can actually, you have people knowing what you're doing.
Exactly.
What I do when I arrive on site as well is I ask for a room or a desk where I can put my things and charge my equipment.
Yeah, make sure it's a room that could be secured, because you don't want your equipment to disappear all of a sudden.
Exactly, especially if it's like a public environment.
Yeah.
And then when I arrive in that room, I just set up my charging station. So I put all my cables. I actually bring an extension, a the multi plugs thing with me. So I can plug all my chargers. And you can set up a charging station that way. Charge your equipment whenever you're not using them. So we talked about that. Try to wear comfortable shoes, but what I found most important is the socks. So try to wear comfortable socks and shoes. And then try to establish a game plan before you start, before you arrive on site. So like Roa said, try to have your survey files already ready with your floor plans. And try to know what you have to do, the different steps you have to do. So you know that the first thing you need to do is, open up the project, maybe take a measurement to scale it.
Yeah.
And then try to see, okay, I have some areas that I need to do first because I know I won't have access later on, blah, 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 blah. So try to have, your game plan.
Yeah, so a lot of those times when I'm on site, I try to tackle the conference rooms first, because I know those will get occupied very quickly. So when I do go on site, or even before going on site, you can have someone schedule the room for you. So that way they're just available, and you could walk in, no problem. And then you can tell the user, hey, I'm all done with the rooms. You can remove the hold and people can use them again.
That's a good tip. I've never done that. That's a really good tip.
Yeah. So I try to do that. And then let's say there are people in the conference room. I know Francois and I have two different approaches to this. I'm more of the blunt approach, and I'm only there once, or I'm not coming back, again soon. So a lot of times I will actually knock on the door and say, I need to test the Wi-Fi in here for about 5 seconds. And I walk in, unless it's somebody like a CEO or something.
Yeah.
Because I have just walked into a room. I kind of gauge, like, I will look at the people, see if they kind of look approachable. So if it's a glass, a conference room, I'll kind of knock, and then I'll point at my equipment. You look kind of important, like you need to be in there. And then I just like poke my head in. I go, I'll be 5 seconds. I'll be quiet. You can keep doing your meeting. I'll be out. And a lot of times they just accept it. There hasn't been one time where someone declined me from going in there.
Yeah. So what I like to do is I like to look, through the window if they have a window. And then if I see that the people is like on the phone, or people are like conducting a meeting, I usually pass and come back later. Or if I see that people are just working, let's say, one person working at their desk, I just, knock on the door and then introduce myself and tell them what I do, and then ask them if I can come into their space. Yeah. And then they usually say yes. Sometimes they ask me, do you need to use my computer? Yeah.
Yeah. Be so prepared for the jokes too. Like, you got your sidekick. You're always going to get that. Are you looking for ghosts?
Yeah. Are you looking for ghosts? Are you going to make my Wi-Fi better? So that's when I say, yes. How much do you have on you? So you can, that's when you use your jokes, and it also keeps you sane from just walking around all day long.
Make it a little fun. So you don't say anything like, depends if you guys pay me, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or that's when you hear the comments from the users, like, Wi-Fi sucks. I can't call my wife. Stuff like that. So I do that, and then I just go around the room, and then if I need to go back later on and the office is closed, I just go in the office and then in and out. So that's when I think the internal communication is important, because people will go inside offices. Like without asking anyone. So sometimes they'd be like, what the heck is this person doing? Yeah. But if they had the internal communication and they know you're doing Wi-Fi work, then, they're like, okay, he's just doing his job.
Yeah, because it might be a room that's sensitive, that has sensitive information. So you want to be careful of that too. Sometimes you may want to double check and say, "May I go into this room?" So that way you're not, walking into any kind of trouble.
Exactly. That's usually what I do. Like if there's like an office used, and then I know that the next office is not used, I would usually ask the person, I'm like, do you mind if I go in the office next door? And they're like, oh no problem, he's out for the morning or something like that. And then at least people are aware, and you just do your work.
Yeah. I would say one thing to do is try to be friendly. And I am kind of blunt when I talk, but I do acknowledge them first. And I go, hi, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Like you want to be friendly. You don't want to just go, I'm here to do Wi-Fi, and then like bust in there.
Yeah. And that's usually hard for the introvert people. Yeah. When someone looks at you, you tend to just, sometimes I'm like that, you tend to just like, look away and then walk away. But I think in those type of situations, it's important to engage. If someone looks at you, just engage and introduce yourself and tell them what you're doing.
And also a smile goes a long way too. You just look friendly when you're smiling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's some of the practical things you could do when you're on site to make it fun and easier to do. Yeah. Something that I like to do as well, and I know, Raul, you like to do as well, is document the AP installation.
Yeah.
Right. So taking pictures of how the AP is installed, and then tell the customer if it's good or if it needs to be adjusted. And the way I do it nowadays is using the Survey iPad app, and it makes it very convenient. So what I would do is I would just survey an area, and whenever I find an AP or I pass an AP, I would just stop my survey. I would locate that AP on the iPad app, and when you click on an AP object in the iPad app nowadays, you can actually have you can add a comment.
Yeah.
So you have an option to add a comment. When you add a comment, you can take a picture, and because you have the iPad with you, you can take a picture directly from the iPad. And when you take a picture with the iPad, this will add that picture to the AP note, and you can retrieve it later on.
Yeah. That feature I think is one of my favorite features on the Ekahau survey for iPad and for the iPhone. One thing I will give you a tip is put your iPad on silent mode, so that way no one hears the picture sound. Because that's definitely gonna make people's heads turn around when you're taking pictures.
It's like when you're in the subway and you hear scratch.
One of the things, I know you stop your survey, Francois. I actually walk twice. So I'll do the survey, and then when I'm done with the survey, I go around taking the pictures afterwards. And so I try to find the right AP. And when I do add a comment, if I see a sticker on the AP itself, I will annotate that as a comment. And a lot of times I'll use the microphone because I don't want to type with my iPad if I'm standing there. So I'll say, I'll hit the microphone and go AP1 IDF 0, something like that. And then it adds it in there. And then I just hit the arrow to add the comment.
That's nice. Yeah, I've never used a mic. I should do that, huh?
Yeah, you just gotta be able to dictate it pretty well, so the iPad can hear. There's been times where it doesn't pick it up. It depends also on the naming convention. Maybe sometimes the iPad just has a hard time hearing what you're saying, but it works for the most part.
You think you will understand my French accent?
Yeah, for sure. Maybe just speak it in French, and then it'll.
Problem solved. Yeah. And then another tip when you take pictures with the iPad, try to always take the picture with the same orientation.
Yes.
So when you export the pictures later on, they don't look weird in your report.
Yeah, you don't have some that are portrait mode and some that are landscape. You'll end up doing a lot of modifications in your report.
Yeah. And then something else to do if I found an AP that's not properly installed, I take a first picture just to state the situation. And then I try to look at the different options I have. And if I have an option to maybe move the AP like a couple of meters, or, maybe drop it down on a pole or anything like that, I would take a second picture, and then I would draw on that second picture with the pen, the alternative mounting option. And so in my report, I would actually have two pictures, one to state the current state and one to give the recommendation on how to install it properly.
Cool.
And then when the survey is done, you can actually, retrieve those pictures, from the Ekahau project. So you can actually do, in your report, you can do, if you use the template reporting, you can do a loop on those AP notes and then put the pictures. And also what you could do is you could extract those pictures. Actually have a script on my website that you can use to extract pictures from the Ekahau project files and then provide those pictures to the customer as well.
Yeah, that's cool. That script is pretty awesome because the client sites definitely like having the photos for documentation purposes. Like here's what the install was at this point in time, and they can always reference back to it if something changes or if they're going to upgrade in the future. They can see like how it was done before. And I've definitely been commented on, yeah, this is really great. We're going to add this to our documents for reference.
Yeah. And sometimes they already have the information from the installers, but it's not always a given.
Yeah, they might just, it depends on the installer. It really does, because I've seen some that just kind of mark it with a pencil on a paper and then take a photo of it. It just depends on how good the installer is or like what you've requested from the installer.
Yeah, that.
Because if you don't request it, you aren't getting it.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. So I think that was pretty a lot of information, right? We could continue talking about it for hours probably and share different experiences we've had. But hopefully that gives you a good starting point if you have no idea what to do in order to prepare a validation survey, or if you don't know which question to ask the customer. Hopefully that will give you a good starting point. Go back to the show notes. We have all the information over there. So cleardesign.net/213. And then if you have other tips that you do when you survey or other things that you do to prepare for a validation
or
survey,
stories.
Stories you want to share, don't hesitate to share that with you. You can do it on Twitter, @ClearDesign. On the website, if you go to, ask a question, you can actually leave a comment to us.
And if you're in our Slack group, you could also tell us there. That would be a good place to talk about stories.
Yeah, exactly. How do we get to the Slack group?
Yeah, if you just go to the website, good segue, Francois. Go to cleardesign.net, and at the top there's a join Slack.
A join Slack button?
Yep.
That easy? Awesome.
Or just cleardesign.net/Slack. I think I set up a shortcut to make it even easier.
Awesome. And then if you join the Slack, you have a channel called Introduce Yourself. You can introduce yourself. And people are very friendly in there. All right. Awesome. Thank you for listening. Will actually be another one, doing another episode talking about AP on a stick surveys, to be more precise, because when you do an AP on a stick survey, you want to think about different things. So we'll do that, and we'll publish that as well in the coming weeks. All right. So you guys have a nice week, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.